Welcome one and all to episode 9 of Express Talk, and for this week I have a very special guest, and one that I am very excited about because it is, for the first time, I am lucky enough to be joined by a world's champion, the current NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Tim Storm. Thank you for joining me.
Michael, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to, and have an opportunity to kind of talk about the sport that I'm so passionate about. I love professional wrestling, and I like talking about it.
As do I. That's why I started a podcast.
I got you.
Well, it's refreshing to hear somebody at the top of his game still be so humble.
Well, I mean, I hear that sometimes. It's, I don't know. It's me. That's just who I am, and I have a tendency to be humble at the right times. But what is that meme that I see all the time? Is don't take my kindness for weakness. It's it's a thing when I get in the ring that I just have a different level that I go to.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on who I'm in there with and what they're bringing, and I can usually match and beat whatever they're bringing, whatever that is. So,
mm-hmm.
But thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Well, let's jump right into it. And
Okay.
The way I normally start with new interviewees is letting them, introduce themselves and, let the fans know who they are and like how they got into the business and who trained them and, what your career's been like, stuff like that, background, pretty much.
I've been in the business for just a little over 20 years, and my initial training, this was at the time when wrestling was pretty hot. WCW was running, WWF was running, and I contacted the power plant and talked to them. But I was also at a place in my life where I didn't want to pick up and move. So I found a smaller. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know exactly what I was looking at. But I found a place about 2.5, 3 hours from where I lived, and I trained with a guy named Bill Ash. And a lot of the listeners now probably won't know who Bill was, but the old school guys all know Bill, and he's very respected. It was as old school training as you could possibly imagine. It was a building that, for the most part, you couldn't stand on the top rope, and some nights you couldn't stand on the second rope because the ceiling was so low. But it was very difficult. It was tough, and I realized on the first night that it was going to be probably the most physically challenging thing that I'd ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coming from a guy that I've done a lot of things. I mean, I've played college football. I participated in just about you name it, and I was a good enough athlete to I won't say excel at it, but to be competitive in a lot of different things. And I realized very quickly that, and that's part of the reason that it hooked me so quick, is I realized that professional wrestling was going to be a challenge that exceeded just about anything else that I'd ever done.
Mm-hmm.
I trained there for about, I want to say not quite 6 months. At the time, I'm a pretty decent sized guy, and there seems to always be a place for bigger guys in wrestling. So I probably got in the ring quicker. Well, I shouldn't say probably. I got in the ring quicker than I should have because of my size. My size and my athletic ability were able to carry me through some things that my knowledge and experience and I wasn't prepared. I got through it, and I got through it pretty well. But I probably could have taken another 4 to 6 months to be better prepared.
Mm-hmm.
But I say a very, very solid basis of psychology, fundamentals, all of those kind of things, where the things gave me a background that's really benefited me over the years. I can step in the ring with any old school, an old school type worker and do well, or I can get in there with somebody who likes to fly around and run a gun, and I can, not that I'm going to do a lot of that, but I can handle that too. So that kind of the mixture, the diverse background of training it's really benefited me over time.
For one, I actually have heard of Bill Ash. I did not know he was a trainer, but you learn something new every day.
Bill, a lot of people know, and this is usually the first question I get when I bring up Bill. Usually the first question is, didn't they make wrestling boots? And that's kind of, his dad owned they made wrestling boots. And at the time, I remember going in and getting my first pair of boots when I was training. And, they had pictures on the wall where it literally was the go-to place for everybody in the business. Everybody, Andre the Giant, all the way down. I mean, it was a who's who of wrestlers. And his dad, and then he helped with that later on. But that's kind of what they were known for. And about 5 blocks from this little town where he had his boot shop, where his dad had the boot shop, he'd rented a building, and every Saturday, we'd go there and spend the day and come out sweaty and bleeding and hurting. And we used to joke about it as Bill would pull a lawn chair up in the corner and for some reason sit with a 2x4 in his lap. And then he had guys that he basically would, that helped with the physical training part. But when I was starting, Bill was probably in his early to mid 50s, still working, and Bill was not a big guy, but he could just flat go, and I learned a ton from him.
Mm-hmm. Did you at least get a discount on the boots?
Not even a little bit. I said he was old school. There was no discount.
Well, that was a great story. As we creep forward, one question I like to ask, independent wrestlers is, the perception of most fans is that if it's not on TV, it doesn't matter. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely not. I've been very fortunate. When I was in training, Bill was trying to do local TV. He was doing local TV, and that's actually how I found the place. There's an ad that they had on their production, and I started while I was in training. Without being paid, obviously, I was doing play-by-play, and just whatever I could do to be around the business and to learn and those kind of things. And looking back now at it, I look at it and think, wow, that shirt's collar was too tight, and I really wasn't very good at that. Now, I was probably the best available at the time for him, especially for what he was paying. But and then I was very fortunate to be with a group called Traditional Championship Wrestling for about 4 or 5 years, and that was just the opposite. It was by another guy that Bill had trained, and it was a production that went nationwide and internationally. Not on all the mainstream channels. They never got one of the big 4 or 5 channels, but on cable, and it was incredibly great production, well done. We had a lot of fairly well-known guys that came in and did, Chris Cruz and those guys that came in and did play-by-play, and it was a great production. Okay, so with that being said, I think wrestling matters. I don't know that I want to get into the differences now, unless you ask me that question later. But it's one of the I don't want to say downfalls of wrestling was one of the negatives to wrestling is any guy that we call them backyard promotions, obviously, but any guy who can go out and have one training session, then claims he's a professional wrestler and he'll work for $10. That's other than those. I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere, but every match matters. And if you're a wrestling fan, as long as it's a good quality wrestling match, then that matters. It's going to appeal to somebody. Now, the shows, and I would say this, the shows that don't matter are the ones where, somebody can go and it's, I don't want to say an embarrassment to the business, but, you got, guys with no boots and no trunks and no training trying to run a wrestling show. That's bad for the business.
Yeah, don't worry, you can.
That's one of those things that it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And if a fan goes and watches that and it's not a good quality product, they're not going to go back. But that's going to spill over to the quality product.
Yeah,
So no, I absolutely don't. I would not say that if it's not on TV, it doesn't matter. It may be, if it's not on TV, you may not be familiar with it, to a person, but it definitely matters.
Do you think that the possible perception of people not realizing it exists hurts indie wrestling?
Well, sure. I know that there's a culture of people out there that only know what they see on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. They're supporting wrestling. But I would also say, especially, I'm based out of Dallas, Texas, and there are 3 or 4 promotions in Texas that on any given weekend, the show quality as far as talent is better than anything you're going to see on TV. And that's not me being protective or trying to, that's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hear the same thing from James Beard, who is I would like to think of as a friend of mine.
James is is director of operations and talent for NWA and is one of my traveling partners. So anything he says, he's a wealth of knowledge. There is nobody, period, more knowledgeable in wrestling than James Beard.
I couldn't help but agree, and I can attest to that, considering myself and Mr. Beard have done monthly discussions since about March, just on professional wrestling, specifically in most cases Texas wrestling, but
well, it's a thing where I have been very, very fortunate over my career that I've had it's kind of I don't want to say old school, but the way that a lot of guys broke into the business or learned about the business was being in the car with veterans. And I've been very fortunate over the years to be able to spend some quality time with some incredibly experienced guys that almost everybody would know. And over the last 4 or 5 years, James and I have been on the road together. I think we were in a car 16 hours this last weekend, and we'll be back in a car 16 hours this weekend. And that's been incredibly valuable. I mean, you talk about getting, especially if James is doing my match, I get instant feedback on my match. And sometimes in the ring, I'm getting feedback from James. If something is wrong, if something's good or something's bad, then I know it pretty quickly. And James is such a professional and such a great way of putting it that he can tell you, okay, here's what I saw. Did you think about doing this, or why did you do it that way? And we have great discussions.
mm-hmm.
But it's a constant learning, and I'm a big believer that in this business, as in life, if you ever get to the point where you think you know everything, you probably need to get out, because there's nobody that knows everything. Because I think you start moving. If you're not moving forward, you're backing up. You don't stay still. You're going to move one direction or the other. So, but to be friends with and travel with, like guys like Skandar Akbar and Matt Bourne, Killer Tim Brooks. I've gotten to sit at the learning tree with people like Buck Robley and Jake Roberts, and sit and watch videotape and say, okay, well, here's what I saw I'll say it now, I guess I couldn't get more successful than the World Championship, but all of those guys are a part of me, and they've helped to whatever success I've had. They're a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you know, with the fact that you've been in the business for as long as you have been, does the younger generation sit under, go to you like you would go to the veterans of yesteryear?
Yeah, and that they do. I think probably my reputation exceeds my ability sometimes. And what I mean by that is for the most part, I'm a nice guy, and I just believe you treat people like you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read one time. I think it was probably Foley's book, his first one, maybe my favorite wrestling book of all time. But he wrote, be careful who you kick on the way up, because those people are going to be kicking you on the way down. And that's always stuck with me. Now, for me personally, I have to make an effort at. And I know this is weird, but it's one of those things. Like I'll watch a match, but I've always kind of been of the impression, like, well, why should who am I to go tell that guy, what I saw and what he can do better, or what
Mm-hmm.
and I've had to now remind myself that that's part of the business and it's part of what helps us all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to get better at doing that. Where I can pull a guy off to the side and say, this is what I saw, and maybe you should try working on this, or whatever, and try to do it the way I would want to be told. It's I think there's a positive way to say most things.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to force myself, because I think that's part of giving back to the business, and I've had to overcome the why would they care what I think to the point where now it's like, okay, well, I realize that a lot of people do care what I think, so now it's my job to pass that on.
That's a good point of view. I can very much agree and understand with your skepticism, but also the idea of wanting to give back to the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know I had an opportunity one day to sit down with Eric Embry, and he was just talking about some of the guys that had helped him, and he made the point that you had to earn respect, but once you earn respect from those guys, they wanted to help you. They wanted to see you succeed, because that's how the knowledge of the business is passed down.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuck with me. That's one of those things that I just went, okay, so I need to get over the why would they care, and become the, all right, whatever I have, if it can help them, then I need to be sharing that.
Mm-hmm. It seems like you have soaked up a lot of knowledge in your years in the business.
Well, I sure have tried. I just think that especially those guys that came before us, they paid a price to get there, a price that many of us don't have to pay now because of what they did. During the territories, that was a different world than the one that we wrestle in, and truthfully, I think it was a better world. Maybe not for the health and the families and those kind of things, purely from a wrestling standpoint. And the guys that experienced that, not only do they deserve, we should be honored to soak up that knowledge. The fact that they would share it with us, because it's a different world now. Wrestling is a different world than it used to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Well, now with the, I know there's a possibility you might not have a take on it, but I figured I would ask if you did. With the fact that Survivor Series is coming up right around the corner, do you have any opinion on Goldberg's return to the ring, and if you think it's a good idea for him to be returning against Brock?
Okay. Let me give you kind of both sides of that. Normally, you could have asked me a lot of Survivor Series questions, and I wouldn't have had a clue, to be honest with you. I do watch sometimes, but usually it's when one of my friends is wrestling, and I want to watch and I want to see what they're doing. I want to see, how they're working. But for the most part, it's not something I sit down and watch on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody may text me and say, whatever. I don't want to be a name dropper. So and so's on TV, and I'll flip it over and I'll watch. But I can't answer that question because I think it's interesting. I think it speaks to where the business is that over and over and over, in order to get as hard as some places work to not allow a guy to get to the top, because it's my belief that they don't want the product to be about a person like it used to be. They want the product to be about everybody. So it seems to me like every time somebody rises to the top, they end up getting pushed back down because they don't want them to be bigger than the business. I get it. But whenever they need a surge or a pop, they always go back to the guys that did exactly what they're trying to keep people from doing. So I saw something the other day where Goldberg made a comment that his son and his wife weren't around when he was getting, when he was undefeated and he was getting the push and he was on TV and it was the hottest thing going. And that's one of the reasons that he's going to do it. He played professional football. He was the monster in the business. He was the real deal. So if the man wants to come back and get in the ring, absolutely come back and get in the ring. And it's gonna make money. It's gonna draw money. And in the old days, that's all that we cared about. It didn't necessarily matter what was happening, but if it was drawing money, that was good for everybody. So, I don't know. It probably won't be a work of art because it's too big. It's too big. Guys just banging on each other. But that's kind of my thing. That's what I do. I'm not a technical artist. I'm not I don't have a lot of finesse. I'm gonna do basically what we're talking about. So I respect that, and I think people will pay to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, in the big picture of things, that's really what it's all about.
I agree with that. I just I don't know. I'm intrigued about this match coming on Sunday with Brock and Goldberg. Definitely, next Sunday actually.
Yeah.
I don't know that they can do any more than just this one match. Unless they exceed expectations. I mean, I'm just speaking purely for myself. Unless they and I won't watch it. But if they don't exceed the expectations set for the match, it won't. I don't think they can turn around and pull the same interest and same crowd after they see it, unless they just go out there and just brutalize each other. And if that happens, Brock is bigger right now, stronger, fresher, younger, has been in the ring the last, I think it's been 12 years or something since Goldberg has wrestled. So, if that's what's going to happen, then, Brock will come out on top and, everybody will be happy to have seen Goldberg, but, I think this is a one-shot deal. At least that's my take on it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think it is too.
I'd love to see them do something that would surprise everybody and make it a two-shot deal. But with what they've got invested in, in Brock Lesnar with his history, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. I mean, I just think at this point, though, that they need to do something to freshen up Brock, because I think people are getting tired of the same old stuff with Brock after about 3 years of the same stuff.
And I wouldn't disagree with that. I guess my question would be, when you're on the contract that he's on, he's not on TV. What do you know? Because I don't. But what is his appearance? It's like 8 or 10 a year or something.
But it's not like they can. It's not like they can freshen him up on the weekly show, and do something to start some kind of hot angle there that you can't.
Yeah.
So you're basically kind of stuck in a in a groove or a rut where you're like, okay, well, this is what we got and it's working, and you can't do something really cool and then okay, we'll have him back in 3 months and follow up on it because wrestling fans now don't have that. They don't have the long term investment mentality. To see people like that in.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. Well, I guess the only thing we can do is just wait and see how it goes.
Oh yeah, and it would be fun. I just, to be honest with you, I will. We'll leave Texas at about 8:30 in the morning, and we'll go up and shoot intros and promos and all that kind of stuff for the. They've started a new series TV. It's going to be an internet series, but it's called Detonation, and it's a lot of our crew from TCW. So anyway, we're shooting the promos and the entrances and all those kind of. I think I'm going to do a sit down interview about the title, and then we'll have the show, and we'll get back to the hotel after we find something to eat, and then we'll get up at 8:30, turn around and drive back. And normally for me, if I get back, at 5:30, I'm in the gym by 6, trying to work out the soreness. And my thing has always been I just have to work harder than all the other guys. So, anyway, the point is, by the time I get home, I won't. I'm pretty sure I won't be investing 2 or 3 hours, and the money in a pay-per-view. Not that it's not worth it. Not saying that at all. I just can't. I probably won't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. I think this is one that's intriguing enough that a lot of people will watch.
I agree. And just for anybody who is listening, the WWE's pay-per-view Survivor Series is not this weekend. It is actually November 20th, which is next weekend.
Okay.
It was my mistake. I thought it was this weekend. But as far as our discussion goes, now I give the ball to you, because this is the part of the podcast where I let the guest disclose their indie company of the week and obscure wrestler of the week. For the obscure wrestler of the week, it's basically just a wrestler that, you think deserves more attention but isn't getting that attention.
Okay. So, which do you want me to do first? Company of the week?
That's up to you.
I think purely that, I'm very fortunate. If there are 4 or 5 hot promotions in Texas, up to this point, I've been working for all of them on a regular basis. So, but I think purely out of company loyalty, I'm going to say Indie Company of the Week is NWA Mid-South in Dyersburg, Tennessee. They run not only a weekly show, they run 2 weekly shows, one on Friday at one location and in Ripley, Tennessee, and then they run Saturday nights in Dyersburg, and they do it every week, 2 shows a week, which, as I'm sure you know, is challenging. It's very trying to keep it fresh and keep it attractive and continue to bring people in, and they do a great job with that. The fans are incredible. They're very loyal. The venue is really, really. It's got a great old school look. The lighting is great. It's just an all around great organization. Mm-hmm. And as far as I may cheat on you, actually, on the wrestler that I think deserves more attention. I think the easy answer for me on that is Adam Asher, who, and I say I'm cheating because he's probably been he has been my best friend in the business for 16, 17 years. My tag partner, he and I actually, it was his Thursday. Tomorrow night, he and I are in a match against War Machine, and the winner of that match, we're currently the VIP tag champions, and that's for the tag title, and the winner of that faces the Dudleys next month. So I think he's one that deserves deserves more attention than he's got. Just a outstanding worker, great mind for the business, great bumper. Sometimes, doesn't know how to say no to anything as far as a bump. And I'm going to cheat by saying I'm going to give a second one too. And I think a second one, and I don't know if you may or may not be familiar, but is a guy named Andy Dalton, who wrestles as Dirty Andy Dalton. And I think he's paid the price in this business as far as doing what he needs to do to be successful. He's gotten some looks. He's not the biggest guy in the business, but super talented. And Dirty's more than a gimmick for him. He finds a way to win. He finds a way to win. I think I'm going to get this wrong, but I think tomorrow night he's wrestling. Help me out with the name. Is it Dijon Donovan? Is that right? A Ring of Honor guy. So it's about 6'7". So that's going to be an interesting matchup. But anyway, those are my two. I cheated, gave you two instead of one, but those are my two guys.
Oh, Donovan Thajak.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I got it backwards, didn't I? Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, well, props to them. Adam Asher and Dirty Andy Dalton, and also props to NWA Mid-South for being this week's wrestler and wrestlers and Indie Company of the Week.
Fantastic. And they all deserve it, by the way. So
I'll take your word for it, champ.
You're gonna have to. You asked my opinion, so you have to take my word on it.
Yep. Now I am gonna go and get your thoughts, if you wouldn't mind, as it's time for some word or name association. I'll say a name and you give your thoughts on the person. Okay. Well, it's fitting to ask this person, considering he's the guy who you just defeated for the NWA World Title, Jax Dane.
Godzilla. The real deal. He's we're only allowed one word.
No, you can just say, go crazy.
Jax was a tough one. He beat me twice in Las Vegas, 1 year apart, and then he beat me at a big show at a casino in Mississippi, and the guy was the real deal. In this business, we don't always count wins and losses, but I can say I may have lost 4 or 5 times in the last 3 years, and at least 3 of them were Jax. So Godzilla is the real deal. He's a monster.
That's a pretty vivid description, or a pretty good description.
He and I have, like I said, battled. That was the 4th time, and it took me 4 to beat him. Every one of them was, for both of us, was incredibly physical, brutal, and one of the things that with the NWA that we're making our mark with is we're bringing back wrestling the way it used to be, which is a less talk, more action, incredibly physical competition style of wrestling. And Jax and I were 2 of the biggest heavyweights, and every time we got in the ring together, it would take us both
The next name is Rob Conway.
Living encyclopedia of wrestling. Rob deserves every accolade that anybody could give to him. I mean, obviously, you know his history, I think. For WWE Tag Team Champions, one of the, back then, one of the best angles where he joins La Resistance. Great angle, well done. And a guy that I go to on a regular basis for advice and input, and two-time NWA World Champion, and he is a living encyclopedia of wrestling. You can ask Rob a question, and not only will you get an answer, you can get an answer, a description, and 3 or 4 examples and of why it will or won't work, or what you could do to make it work. And he's just a great wrestling mind.
I think I've always believed that Rob Conway was a great talent and had untapped potential and a missed opportunity for the WWE.
Absolutely. I mean, and to this day, Rob and I have worked a lot. I've been in locker rooms, the ring, cars, you name it, and I believe right now that he should be on the main roster of WWE right now, and he would be one of their top guys.
I don't disagree with you. I definitely do not disagree with you. But the next name on the list is actually somewhat of a dynasty.
Okay.
Being from Texas, I'd feel inept not asking you about the Von Erichs.
That's what I thought. That's where I thought you were going. Okay. I grew up. I was very fortunate about where I lived. I grew up in Arkansas, and my wrestling influence was varied. I got Memphis wrestling in the morning. I got Georgia Championship wrestling in the afternoon, and I got World Class at night. And every Saturday, while most kids were watching cartoons, that's what I was watching with wrestling. And like many, especially in the 80s, early 90s, World Class was in a league of its own.
Mm-hmm.
The camera positioning, the use of music, the way they edited was groundbreaking in a lot of ways. And one of the greatest honors that I ever had was, two, I guess. One was being inducted into Southern Wrestling Hall of Fame at the same time as the Von Erichs. That was an honor. And then the second thing was having somebody, 6 or 7 years, a guy I still work with on a monthly basis, walk up to me and he said, I want you to come start wrestling with me. And I said, tell me what's going on. And he goes, I want you to be my Kerry Von Erich. He goes, that's what I see when I look at you, and that's what I want you to do. And, you talk about a sales pitch. He didn't know it at the time, but that was a sales pitch that reached inside and struck gold for me, because obviously the history of the Von Erichs is great and sad at the same time. But if you just look at, the three brothers that did the most, you've got you got 3 different examples, almost 3 different types of wrestlers. Build, skill level, mic work, you name it. And, I've heard, because he was the first to die, I've heard nothing but that David was the best of all of them. Now, I probably saw the least of him. But I've gone back and I've watched everything I could find, and for a guy as big as he was, he probably was the best on the mic and probably the best in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go with Kevin, who, the stories I've read are just amazing about, the style that those guys worked,
mm-hmm.
because of their dad was unbelievably physical. I heard a story about, I read or saw a story about that Kevin broke a tooth in a match and was digging through the office, digging through the drawers, and found a pair of pliers and pulled his own tooth. He wrestled barefoot, which anybody who's ever done that, he made a career of it, and that's tough. Just that alone. He may have been, I know that's tough to say, but he may have been the best athlete of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
As big as he was, he pioneered some of the flying stuff. And then you've got Kerry, who may have been the most popular one because I think of just his look and his physique. I've always heard he was a world-class discus thrower. But and then what he did basically, and I'm sure most fans that know anything about the Von Erichs know this, but when he lost his leg, he continued to work, and nobody knew that he'd lost it. He
mm-hmm.
wouldn't even take his boot off the shower because he didn't want anybody to know. A dynasty that it definitely affected my wrestling life from an early age.
That I can completely understand that, and I can see how highly you speak of them.
Yeah, and, people in general, we all, in some way or another, we're all flawed. It's just the way we are. And some of us have small flaws, and some of us have great flaws. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt. You look at those guys and you say, okay, well they had flaws.
Yeah,
but we all do. So
that's true.
I don't. I take that and I kind of look at it and go, okay, well, that's being human.
Mm-hmm.
And I separate that from wrestling ability because they were in an interesting situation, strictly from the standpoint, and it's old school thinking that if you're going to have a promotion, you're going to base that promotion around the guys that you can trust and you can count on.
Yeah.
And Fritz Von Erich counted on his family and built it around them. That's a great situation to be in. There's also a ton of pressure, related with that. So, anyway, yeah, I have a lot of respect for those guys, and
mm-hmm.
they were amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, since we started in Denton, Texas, let's now head over to Amarillo.
Okay.
Terry Funk.
Okay, I run into a problem or an issue when I'll have a promoter say, hey, I want to bring you in. Who would you like to work? My problem is the guys that I want to work aren't working anymore. And Terry Funk is one of those guys. I wish I've met him. He's a gentleman. He had a unique style, obviously. A lot of the things that he did, people got. At times, people said he did too much comedy, and I disagree with that. I think that was just unique.
Mm-hmm.
Just a unique situation.
Yeah.
But my list of guys that I would love to work, he's one of them, and he was part of one of the hottest angles in the history of wrestling. With Ric Flair, when he was a judge at ringside, and
yeah, people forget how effective that angle was.
Oh, it was amazing, and again, this is my full wrestling knowledge, but I'll refer to the Foley book, and I will say, Foley tells a story about, Terry Funk was kind of one of his idols, and he talks about the first time they got in the ring together. And it was he says it was his belief that Terry Funk had maybe the best punch in the business. And he said they got to that spot in the match, and Terry reared back to hit him in the head, and Foley said, I can remember thinking, oh, here it comes, I'm going to learn the secret. And he said, and then Terry Funk hit me in the head as hard as he could. And that was the secret of the best punch in the business, and it was real. I guarantee you, I can't tell you how long it's been since I've had a match that I didn't quote Terry Funk before the match, because one of his famous quotes was, every match is a great match until it starts. And then it's up to you. And I tell you what, I'll have some idea, and some guy will say, oh, this is going to be great. And I'll say, Terry Funk says every match is great before it starts. What matters is what we do out there. So, a legend, a legitimate living legend, and I hope that people do and can appreciate what he has done for the wrestling business for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And I've read that he had some health problems, and it terrifies me. That's one that I don't ever want to lose.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you completely about everything you said about Terry. I will say that in no uncertain terms, Terry is one of the people I idolize in the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of his longevity and just the fact that he seems to be always on top of what is, what is cool, I guess.
Just one of the most sincere, nicest guys that you'd ever want to meet. I know he did a clinic in Amarillo for the NWA promotion there, and just super nice, humble. He's forgotten more about wrestling than most of us combined will ever know. Just amazing.
I completely agree, and I know we could sit here and talk about Terry for forever. But the next name on the list is Byron Wilcott.
Yeah, Byron and I have. Byron is who I beat for the North American. And he and I had some battles. He's a big man. He's probably a legitimate 6'5", and mentally, he thinks of himself as, well, he can do just about anything. So he likes to fly around a little bit, and kind of my job when we're together is to stop that from happening. Great look, great with a mic, super talented, and so creative that sometimes, at least for me, not a detriment to him, but he's so creative that sometimes that was hard for me to follow some of the things some of the way his mind works.
Mm-hmm.
But I consider him a friend. We don't work together much right now, but we did a lot in the past, and who knows, maybe in the future. Super talented guy. Like I said, I consider him my friend.
Mm-hmm. The last name on the list is the president of the National Wrestling Alliance, Mr. Bruce Tharpe.
Mr. Tharpe is gutsy. He stepped out because he truly believes in the NWA. His commitment to the history of the business, his commitment to bringing the NWA back to prominence again, and of keeping the history alive. I can't tell you how much I respect that. Being the NWA World Champion was not something that I ever dreamed of, because that was above anything that I thought I could ever accomplish. But I grew up being an NWA fan. I still watch and learn the Four Horsemen, Arn Anderson, Tully,
I could list 50 other guys that part of that era that made the business. But I love the history of professional wrestling. And what I respect about Bruce Tharpe is he loves the history of wrestling. He respects the history of wrestling. And he's so committed to bringing that style and that type of wrestling in the name of the NWA back to prominence. And I just can't help but just, spill over with respect for somebody who has that kind of commitment. And besides that, he's just a good guy. He's a good person.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great to hear, and I have a great amount of respect for Mr. Tharpe too, for the same reason that you do.
Very cool. Good deal. He deserves that. That was so. I get it. He deserves that from all of us.
Yeah, I agree. The last part of the show is your opportunity to, hype up any upcoming events that you're attending or competing at, or, if you want to put over where the fans can find you on social media or anything of that nature, here's your opportunity to do so.
Okay. Tomorrow night in Arlington, Texas, Adam Asher and I take on, Ray Rowe and Hanson. You can find us there Saturday night. I'm in Dyersburg, Tennessee, defending the NWA World Heavyweight title. I think I'm back in Dyersburg December 3rd. I am every third Friday. I am in NWA Texoma, which is up near Denton County. It's in Sherman, Texas. I'll be there in New York. The NWA has a new franchise there, and their first show is going to be, I believe, the 28th. I will be in Japan either the week before that or the week after. I will be at the NWA franchise in Oregon on January 7th. And those are the ones that just pop into my head, but you can find all those things on my Facebook page, Tim Storm, or you can contact me on Twitter at TimStorm01. But that's my contact information, and my focus right now is defending the most prominent, the most prestigious title in the history of wrestling, and that's the NWA World Heavyweight Championships. And I cut a promo this weekend. It was the first time I've opened up on TV and kind of spilled my feelings. And this is a deal that the list of who has won this title is a who's who in professional wrestling, all the way back to 1948. And you start going through those names, and a lot of the guys that we talked about, I think everybody relates that to Flair, who held it 9 times, but that title is a who's who of professional wrestling. All the way back, Lou Thesz was the second man. He beat Orville Brown in 1949 to win it. But you go through the list, and obviously I'm not going to name. There's only been 52 men to hold it. I'm the 53rd. But it's everything from Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Dory Funk Jr. You go toward that the middle era with Ricky Steamboat and Sting and Sabu. You go to the more current era, or you can go to Japan and you can say Giant Baba and the Great Buddha, Kojima, Tenzan. You can go to more of the current era and say toward the end with Jeff Jarrett, AJ Styles, and then you can go even more current and say Adam Pearce, Rob Conway, Jack Stane, and now Tim Storm. So my focus right now is the NWA World Heavyweight Championship and defending that literally all over the world, including Japan. I'd like to go to Australia this year. That's on my list of places I'd like to go, and one is already scheduled. So my focus is on defending and retaining the most important title in the history of our business. And I'm honored, and it's a pleasure to be representing the NWA with that title.
It's a busy time to be champ.
It's always a great time to be the champ. It's always a great time. It literally does not get any better than this.
Well, for you, the viewer, I want to hear from you, and by letting me know what you thought of the podcast this week. And you can do that by leaving a comment down in the comment section below, or if you don't want to leave a comment, you can always leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this that you can only find right here at Wrestling Express. And I would like to thank the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, Mr. Tim Storm, for joining me on this week's episode of Express Talk.
Michael, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you, and like I said when we started, I love and am passionate about the wrestling business, and I can tell you are too. Like you said, that's why you've got a podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.